Hello and welcome to the 15-minute show, part of the Arsenal Therapy podcast. I'm here by myself today to run through some Arsenal stories. Fortunately, the boys couldn't make it, but we didn't want to let you down. First up, we've got the Jurrien Timber news. Obviously, it was a massive blow to lose him on Saturday. This was one of the stars of our pre-season. He was someone that looked like he'd just settled. He looked like he belonged to play for Arsenal. Very much what we needed. A real physical, demanding presence at the back who can play right across the back four. And someone that we've been really bigging up as the perfect signing to aid our depth issue and enable us to just look more comfortable on the ball. And as the season goes on, as we really start to feel the pinch with game time and so on, Timber was the perfect player to have. We've seen him pop in for Zinchenko at left back. We've seen him at right back during pre-season, and for Ajax, he obviously played centre back. So this injury is a massive blow for Arsenal. The movement itself didn't look good because it's a very unnatural way to move your body. So, and there's also reports of, did it happen in the first half? Did it happen in the second? There is one incident which a lot of people have pinpointed on social media in the first half where there is contact on that knee, but it seems there is a debate around which knee he actually hurt. The other bit is the decision of the Arsenal medical staff to let him go back on the field. And obviously, that's not just the decision of the medical staff. They do listen to the player. If the player says they're good to go on, that's going to play a part in the decision. There's also Arteta has the final call there. So it is one of those, it is not just the decision of the medical staff who make the final call on all of these decisions. But either way, it's a massive blow. The injury that, or the instance that actually took him off the field was one that we've all seen it now. It looked a very, very strange movement. It looked like nothing really happened. And that tends to be when we see the worst injuries. Now, the news over the last couple of days has been very mixed. Obviously, Arsenal put out that statement last night, which was very much, we're not going to tell you anything right now. We still don't know. He's going to be assessed over the next few days. So the reports range from a meniscus injury to an ACL. Obviously, if it's a fully ruptured ACL injury, that could see him out for up to a year. And that's an injury that a lot of players struggle to come back from to the full extent of their physical capabilities. With modern medicine, we are seeing more and more players coming back, but it's still a massive injury. And at 22 years old, for a player like Timber to lose a full year of his career at such a crucial point where he's having to adapt from the Netherlands, which is essentially a development league, through to the best league in the world, that's the timing couldn't be worse for him. But at the same time, we are told that ACL injuries can generally be spotted quite quickly. It tends to be quite obvious when the scans are done. So hopefully the fact that it hasn't shown up straight away, and Arsenal said that they're continuing to assess it, means that the news isn't as bad as we all hope. I think right now everyone is fearing the worst and everyone is expecting it to be an ACL injury. However, that leaves the question, do we go into the window? Do we manage with the squad we've got? Obviously, there is still reports out there that Kieran Tierney will be sold. It seems Arsenal aren't willing to let him go on loan. However, we may see a loan with an obligation to buy, a bit like what Brentford have done with Arsenal to help with David Raya. So once that deal is an option, it seems that it'll become an obligation after so many appearances. And that could be something that we see with Kieran Tierney, especially if we sell him to a club like Newcastle, who are being very, very careful and respectful of FFP. Complete contrast to Chelsea, despite how much glorification you'll hear of what Todd Bowley has done. But the question is for Arsenal, do we go into the market? Kieran Tierney clearly isn't part of Mikel Arteta's plans, and we've seen ourselves the difference in technical quality when Timber or any of our other players go off and Kieran Tierney's the man that comes on. Going forward as an overlapping fullback, Tierney's fantastic. He's one of the best in the league. However, Arsenal don't want that on the left-hand side of the pitch. And despite fans crying out for it, that's not how we play. And that system and the way we play now has got us from a team finishing outside the top four to challenging for a title. So for the odd game where it works, we have to stick to what we do. It's very easy to say we should change this, we should play Tierney, we should go back to this and that when things don't quite go to plan. But we got 84 points last season and we led the table for a long, long period of time. So switching back to a style of play that wasn't getting us that number of points would be reactionary, and it's also one of those we have to stick to what we do well. That's why we're in the position we're in, which leads to kind of who do we look at if we were going to add a fullback. Now, Timber's biggest quality is the fact he can play across all four positions at the back line. So getting someone who can do that is going to be very, very difficult. And one of the reports was that Arsenal would look at Aymeric Laporte from Man City. Now, that came from Fabrizio Romano. So you expect there to be some form of reliability with that report. However, Romano has said that City aren't keen to sell another player to Arsenal. Selling to us over the last year massively strengthened us. It didn't weaken them, let's be completely honest about that. But Zinchenko and Jesus came to Arsenal with a point to prove, and the two of them have very much done that. Obviously, Jesus had his injury, but he is a player who, when he's fully fit, he transformed us, as did Zinchenko. Laporte would be leaving City as someone who won multiple titles, was a starter for a long time. He did his ACL as well, so it's ironic that he would be coming in to replace Timber. And he would also be coming into Arsenal with a point to prove. Now, the question there is, where would he be coming into play? Because he's very much a proper defender. He's a centre back at heart. He could probably play at left back. We know he's got a wand of a left foot, but he isn't someone that could fill across four positions. And then that leaves at your left centre back position, we would have him, Gabriel, and Kivior. That's a lot of competition for one spot. And Kivior does bring a bit more versatility, but Gabriel doesn't. He's someone that's going to want to start in that left centre back position. So the link to Laporte, to me, doesn't seem it definitely doesn't seem the wisest signing that we could make this window. And I know Arteta likes him, but we need more depth on the right-hand side, because Timber could have covered Saliba as well. And that was one of the biggest things we saw last season, was the drop-off whenever Rob Holding came in. But along with the news with Timber's injury and the links to Laporte, there's also been talk of Cancelo. Cancelo's a player who could play at either full-back option, or he could come on further up the park. We know he's incredibly creative. That right foot can just pick anyone out, and he offers you a very, very different option. The issue we've got with Cancelo, he's 29, he's on huge wages at City. City don't want to sell to Arsenal. So selling a player like Laporte, who's really far down the pecking order for them, may be an option. Selling Cancelo, who's a player that has had a fallout with Pep and isn't down the pecking order because of quality, but because of personality, that seems like something that they would only do if they were desperate to get rid of him, possibly in the last week of the window. And even at that this still feels like a big risk for Arsenal, and just because his personality doesn't always click with the squads he's in. But there are obviously other options we could look at. One is we add a midfielder who could come in and really add steel in the middle of the park, allowing Thomas Partey to be the cover at fullback as well. So it isn't just a case of going out and buying another defender, because depending on how long Timber is going to be out for, we also don't want to stockpile players that aren't good enough. Fresneda is a name that's been linked. He has his relegation release clause, and he is someone who was linked to Barcelona, was linked heavily to Arsenal. no one's actually moved for him yet, despite him being available for around 20 million euro. And that price tag is so cheap, you would have expected someone to have taken a punt on him, given the huge potential that we're told he has. But it does seem Fresneda is a player that's extremely raw and would take a lot of development. And the question is, do Arsenal have space and time for that at this moment? Because the standards at the football club are so high that bringing in a young player to develop, even with someone like Timber out, that's a big risk. Now, in terms of outgoings, Balogun is obviously the big story of the summer for us, and it seems Monaco have now bid £42 million for him. That bid has once again been rejected for Arsenal, but the reports are that Monaco are in pole position to sign him. That leaves, that means West Ham, who have been linked, must still have some distance to go. We haven't heard of any bids, we haven't heard of talks, but Balogun is a player that looks like interest is growing in him. There's still Inter lingering in the background, and we're told they can't afford him. But it may be that come the last 2 weeks of the window, clubs suddenly find money that they didn't want to spend in the early stages of the window. And Balogun's a goal scorer. So if you're a team that are short in goals, we saw the team he played in last year at Reims. They weren't scoring a lot of goals, weren't scoring a lot of getting a lot of chances, but he still managed to score 21 league goals. Now, that's a huge boost to have in your squad, a player that you know can lead the line for a full season. So I expect Arsenal to get the full 50 million for Balogun now that there are multiple clubs interested. And if he goes within the Premier League, we could see him go for over 50 million, especially if West Ham come in, because if Monaco offer that money, West Ham would have to outbid them, because there would probably be a likelihood that Arsenal would prefer to sell outside the Premier League if they could get the same money for Balogun. Now, along with that, one of the crazier stories that we've seen this week is Gabriel Magalhaes being linked to Saudi Arabia. The story was first reported by a Saudi journalist and tweeting from the BBC Saudi account. Now, that in itself should hold a bit of credibility, but there's also doubts around this. The Mirror have since picked it up. It was John Cross wrote the story, but he does cite this journalist in Saudi as his source. And the talks in that were said to be fairly advanced, but it's one of those, we don't know. We don't really know anything about it, and it seems to be linked heavily on the fact that Gabriel didn't start at the weekend. Now, that injury, that decision seemed to be down to a mix of tactical flexibility and also Gabriel picking up a knock on his calf going into the game. So he did come on late in the game, but we will see what happens there. He's got a long contract at Arsenal. He signed a new deal in February or March time. So if he was to leave Arsenal, you would expect an absolutely massive fee. But at this point, I do not believe a single word of that story, and I would be very cautious about buying too much into that. And in terms of other outgoings, we've heard the news that Nicolas Pepe has agreed a 3-year deal with Besiktas. But right now, he's in negotiations to see if Arsenal will terminate his contract. Getting Pepe off the books, if it was a straight termination with no payout fee, could be worthwhile doing because he's on big wages. He's someone that there's just so little interest in that Arsenal are really struggling to get rid of him. We've discussed him on this show before. I really struggle to see why no one has taken any interest in Pepe, because despite the fact he's not good enough for the way Arsenal play, and he's not a kind of high possession player. He's someone that scores goals and goals win you games. And Pepe's a player that can thrive in counter-attacking sides. So you get him for the right price. He's someone that clubs should be looking at. But all in all, I think we just need to get him off our books at the minute. And if we can do that, that will be a win for the club. He's one of the last players from that period that we need to get rid of who are on big wages, and him and probably getting rid of Cedric with another termination will be a huge boost for us this summer, just to get those wages off the books for players that aren't going to contribute. But on the incomings front, another player that has been linked is Ansu Fati from Barcelona. This is one that came from FCB Radio and hasn't been widely reported. He's another player who suffered an ACL injury and has slowly been getting back to form. But it is also one of those that there's no credible links to him at this time. I think many people would be happy to see him. He can play on either wing. He's got a lot of trickery in his locker. He's no longer the high energy sprinter that he was a few years ago, and hasn't really got that back since his injury. But there are a lot of similarities to players like Rodrigo at Real Madrid. So this is a guy with a lot of quality in his locker and still very young at this point. So let's just watch this space on that one and see. He could be a very good option because, as I said, he can play on either wing, and it would help us with some depth behind Saka as well. Because I haven't seen the Timber injury. Just imagine the meltdown if it was Saka and we didn't have proper backup for him. So with that in mind, we will leave the show there, and hopefully we will be hit with some good news on Jurriën Timber over the next couple of days. But thanks again for joining, and if you've enjoyed the show, please hit the like and subscribe button, and thank you to everyone that helps us continue to grow our audience on this show. Have a great day.